So for my presentation this morning, my name is Priscilla Marian Visai, and I am the research assistant here in Vanuatu for the Trans-Pacific project, which sadly has ended. But I will be presenting under Team 2, Food System, Lifestyle and Health, as you've heard. My presentation title for this morning is Local Perspective on Climate Change Adaptation and Lifestyle Changes in the village of Viana, Emau Island in Vanuatu. This village is our rural lab here in Vanuatu. It's where we also did our Chances project in. This presentation, as stated, is an ongoing study. It is derived from the Trans-Pacific project under the river called 3, which looks at coastal communities that are facing climate change effects such as coastal vulnerability, lagoon health, and sea level rise. So this is a work in progress. The main objective of this research or this ongoing study is to understand how Viana village families perceive and respond to environmental changes, particularly in relation to their farming practices, lifestyle, and community dynamics, which relates to Falah's themes of family farming lifestyle and the resilience of communities that are facing climate change. So there are 3 scopes to this study. The first one is to find how villages or people in Viana village perceive the impacts of coastal erosion, which is their main challenge on their lives. And second scope of study is to investigate whether and how agricultural techniques have been adjusted due to environmental changes. And the last one is to examine the role of cultural values, local knowledge, and evolving needs in adaptation efforts. So the methodology used in this study is a qualitative approach where we employ interviews and have observed participants in this study. Okay, so this is Viana village. Since it is located on an island, that is an outer island, so we have to go by boat, yes, to Viana. So our first perspective is we have come to find out that the Viana village community or the people in Viana, they even though they're vulnerable to coastal erosion, as they can see in their day-to-day life that is happening, the concept of climate change to them is understood. The scientific discourse or the understanding of climate change in the scientific discourse is not part of their view for what climate change is. And for example, coastal erosion to them is seen as a natural behavior of the sea rather than the symptom of a broader environmental changes driven by global factors. So this doesn't necessarily reflect their ignorance, but rather a different way of interpreting environmental changes, which is rooted in their lived experience and traditional knowledge. So the gap between those perspectives can stem from several factors, such as language barriers. So there is not the scientific term for climate change and sea level rise. It may not have a direct translation in the local language, so it makes communication difficult for them to understand what climate change and sea level rise is. The access to information, they're without regular contact with educational or climate change programs or media coverage, since they are also on outer island and the rural community. This community may not be exposed to scientific narratives about climate change. And last one is their lived experience versus the global context. So for villagers that have an extensive knowledge about the environment, environment changes can be often perceived as a result of natural forces. So as stated, this is the coastal erosion that is happening in Guyana. It is a big challenge for them. Sorry. And it's been happening since there used to be land where the rocks are here, but now it's all the land up. They have lost land and they have lost homes, and they are also moving inland. So our second scope of study is for the family farming practices. We found out that their farming practices haven't changed over the years. It has mostly stayed the same. And while there have been minor adjustments, their farming practices have fundamentally remained rooted in the traditional methods with little adoption to modern techniques. So although the government of Vanuatu and NGOs here have prioritized projects that are aimed at improving farming practices in the recent years, Guyana community has never been part of those initiatives. Nevertheless, those families there, they have access to their own gardens and they have access to the crops in either individuals or the family gardens. So the main crops planted there are usually cassava, yam, taro, island cabbage, vegetables, and sweet potatoes. For the traditional food preservation, what we found out was that they do not really engage in traditional food preservation now, but only during long season, where the dry periods of long season. This is when they engage in traditional food preservation because they are also facing water scarcity when there's a long period of dry season. So this is when mothers they engage in traditional food preservation just to ensure that the usage of water in every meal is managed. And while villagers are aware of new food preservation techniques and they heard about training programs that are doing food preservation, they have never had the chance to participate or have such projects reach their communities. They do not really face urgent farming challenges because they have fertile soil and they also have a lot of inland forests that can be cleared for gardens. Their farming is usually mainly for subsistence, with only few households occasionally selling produce at the town markets. This practice has declined over the years as rising cost of living in the open has caused the people to just stay back in the village and just grow food for their own for subsistence. And over the years, as people are moving to the seasonal labor schemes, especially the men in the village, or the family members usually rely on them. So they don't usually come for the selling of the products in the markets. So as the men are usually involved in the seasonal labor schemes, the women take the responsibility to the farming most of the time, but they only focus on crops that are easier to plant and harvest, minimizing the labor demands. Our last scope is lifestyle adjustments. As said, the people of Guyana, they see the environment as a connected whole, where the adapting to change involve not just the practical actions, but their social ties, spiritual beliefs, and relationship with nature. So their culture doesn't completely shape how they see and respond to climate change, as a culture that doesn't stop them from learning new things every day. So in the ongoing study, we want to focus on the active role of the villages and how it plays in their understanding and responses to climate change. So one way to look at that, how people understand climate change in Vienna, is to say that they mix knowledge from different sources. So this could include what they've learned from their ancestors, what they've observed in nature, and what they've heard from media, school, and other places. So this creates a blend of scientific knowledge and local knowledge. So it assumes that that knowledge is passed down, observed, or received from outside sources, and that people's role is just to pick between those bits of knowledge, like shopping for ideas. According to a study by Dr. Anna Pash in 2019, this perspective places too much emphasis on people consciously selecting information, and it overlooks the fact that they also create new knowledge through the experiences and the interaction with the surroundings. So this is also true for the people of Viana village. And examining how people adopt adaptive responses and what they do in their daily lives, it provides a deeper understanding of the processes that is often grouped under the conception of adaptation. So the challenges or the possible challenges and the possible adapted responses to this study, the possible challenges of Viana village is when is the geographic isolation. So it is a remote location which limits transportation and increase costs, making it harder for the government and NGO programs to reach the community. Limited communication infrastructure. As we know, information usually spread through formal channels. So it leaves rural villages like Viana out disconnected from communication. Their project selection bias, as priorities often given to more dense populated areas, greater good for the greater population. So since they are less populated and the area that they're living is not economically significant, so it can makes them to be overlooked by projects from NGOs or the government. And lack of advocacy and representation. Without a strong local representation, Viana needs may not be voiced during project planning and funding allocations. And also resource constraints. The limited resources means only project target areas where quick impacts are visible, often neglecting isolated village. So the impacts on them, it could leave because as we know, they're using traditional farming methods. So if it comes to where there's extreme weather events, they do not have access to climate resilient crops or new techniques, leaving the food security vulnerable. And also because of the main challenge, which is coastal erosion, without improvement to what is already there, they could be more exposed to coastal erosion. Yes, and limited knowledge transfer. Climate change remain abstract without outreach programs, making finding collaboratively adapted responses challenging. Self-reliance. Villages rely heavily on traditional knowledge and communal practices to cope with environmental changes. And because of those projects not going into those communities, so it limits the opportunities for the young people there. So they are starting to move out, living in search of education, jobs back in the urban. So the possible adapted response that we can come up with is to bridge knowledge systems, that is integrating scientific concepts with local understanding to empower the community. And we could co-develop adapted response with the community that respect the traditional practices while incorporating scientific insights. As we know, the media often doesn't highlights how vulnerable these communities are, but it is also important to show that these islanders are also finding solutions, making decisions, and using the knowledge to respond to these challenges. This approach, it respects the role of the local people as active participants in shaping their futures rather than just being portrayed as helpless in the face of global changes. In conclusion, the community's view on climate change are quite different from what the media and organization often share. These differences are not just mixed ideas, but it reflects the reality of those people and their experiences in their daily lives, shaped by the environment and the social connections. So understanding climate change in this study, it means to recognize the unique ways communities like Guyana perceive and respond to change grounded in their own lived experience. Yes, and this is a picture from 2022, and there is one of the graveyard that is already been taken away by the coastal erosion. And there's been a lot of change to what we can see now from our visits to the village. And this was our last visit to Viana village before our project was ended. Yes. Thank you everyone for listening. Is there a question?
Just so, okay. My question was about, as I understood, this island don't have any problem with soft water resource, but and so they are adapted.
Maureen, I cannot hear you.
Maybe you have to talk into the... Tu peux répéter la... Hi, Marianne, do you hear me? Yes. It's Olivier.
Hi, Olivier.
Yes, it was a question from Jean-François Marini, yes. And he asked for the water problematic. Is there on this island a specific problematic regarding water resources? Soft water resources and fresh water.
The only available water resource in the community is rainwater, where they use the polytanks to save the rainwater. Otherwise, there's no other sources of water in the community except for the sea.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question for Marianne?
Yes.
Did you hear the question, Marianne?
No.
Oh, can you repeat, please, George? Yes.
Sorry, Priscilla, I was just asking about, you mentioned traditional methods of water management and food preservation. I just was wondering if you could say a few words about that, what those are.
Okay. The traditional method is not for water, but for the food preservation. How the mothers, they have to preserve the food that can last for up to 1 week, sometimes a month, just so that they can manage their water, because every time during meal they have to use water to prepare the food. So by preserving the food, they don't have to use water in every meal, but they just get to eat that preserved food for how many days it can last. So this is how they manage water in food preservation. So they preserve food, and this also manages their water usage. But there's no traditional method in water management.
Another question, a short question.
I cannot hear the question.
Yes. I will repeat the question. Is in terms of drinks, do they what kind of drinks they consume on the island? Is it water or is it other kind of drinks? Is it the question?
So they usually have rainwater where they keep in their tanks, but what they told us was that if it goes to worse, like they have no water during long periods of El Nino or dry season, they usually have to come to where the main island, Evate, to get water, or they drink coconut water.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. And what about sodas? Soda.
About what?
Soda. Soft drinks.
No. I don't think they do soft drinks because it's a rural setting. So unless they come to town, maybe they can purchase that from shops.